Hello, everyone. Today I have a treat for you. I'm here with Patricia Daly, a nutritional therapist based in Ireland. I have been working with nutrigenomics for quite some time, and I had the privilege to hear Patricia's speech at the third International Keto Live conference in Switzerland last June on the same matter. But even more inspiring was hearing Patricia's personal story after being diagnosed with an aggressive eye tumor. Patricia, welcome. It's a
Thank you
pleasure.
very much. Thanks so much for having me. It's lovely to reconnect here, Andreia. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us. And can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how your personal experiences shaped your professional path and vice versa?
Yeah, sure. So it is quite a long story because it started 15 years ago, believe it or not. So, but I'm trying to cut it as short as possible. Yeah. So I am originally from Switzerland and I moved to Ireland in 2007. So love pulled me to Ireland. I'm married now to an Irishman. That's why I'm still here. Exactly. Yeah, shortly after I moved over to Ireland, I had just really weird symptoms in my eye. I didn't get headaches or anything, but I just had this flickering sort of on the side of my eye that I found interesting. It never disappeared. Even when I closed my eyes, I could sort of sense it and see it. And also adapting. I used to cycle. I was a corporate banker. I used to work in international corporate banking here in Dublin. And I cycled to work and I had to park my bike in sort of an underground parking. And whenever I cycled down from light to dark, I realized, God, I can't adjust to the dark. I always had to almost just stop for a while for about half a minute until I could see with the right eye. And that's just really a bit odd, but I'll keep an eye. I wasn't overly worried because there's no pain or anything. And then I did handstands with my niece and nephew, and then my retina must have detached and I completely lost vision. The next day, I went to an optician. I was still sort of, I don't know what this is. I'm sure it's not too bad. And then that sort of kickstarted the whole process. The retina was detached, but it was because of a really large tumor that was sitting on the choroid inside the eye. It was 1.6, I think, at the beginning, 1.6 millimeters. So, really large in the eyeball. So I had to go to the UK at the time because in Ireland there weren't any treatments available because it was such a rare type of cancer. So we went to the UK. I got plaque radiotherapy. So that's basically a radioactive plaque. You get general anesthetic. They stitch it to the back of the eye. They leave it there. You stay in hospital and then they take it out again. And I had a really good response. Everyone was delighted. The tumor shrank. And then my oncologist, basically, I said, but it is really concerning me having cancer at the age of 28. Where did I go wrong? I mean, I wasn't sort of blaming myself or on a guilt trip or anything, but there must be something a bit odd here. So is there anything I should be doing? And he was, no, don't worry. Just go back to your old life and go back to work in about 3-4 weeks and, forget about it. And that sounds a little bit odd to me. So just my common sense, and I didn't really know anything about health and a little bit about nutrition. I was a triathlete. I was training a lot in triathlon as a teenager in my early 20s. And so nutrition obviously had some importance. But then I sort of went back and I said, no, I want to do something. And just instinctively, I just start to eat better and learn about nutrition. So I signed up for a course and I went sort of the typical, lots of whole grains, eliminating animal food as much as possible. I think I still had a bit of fish and a bit of chicken, but no red meat, and just loads of fruit and vegetables, juicing. But then, unfortunately, not even 2 years later, I had a relapse. And I also had my daughter in between. And then I knew already when she was 5-6 weeks old, the symptoms are back and there's just something not right. The scan was clear. So everybody said, just relax, it's in your head or whatever. And I was, no, there's something wrong. And then there was a lot of messing up and scans were lost and it was very, very chaotic and we lost a lot of time. So ultimately, beginning of June, that was in 2010, I had a relapse. So treatment again, but a different type of treatment this time, proton beam therapy, surgery. And again, great response, but the same thing again in 2012. It looked like I had tumor activity again, and they were, okay, let's try Avastin injections. And I was, well, I'm sort of a little bit done with trying things, and it doesn't seem to ever work. And I had lost a bit of faith and trust. So I started researching the metabolic theory and Tom Seyfried's work and Johannes Koy also in Germany. And I had come across, cancer metabolism and how that's completely different in cancer cells. And I was, let me just try this. And I had talked to my consultant already in 2010, and he said, no, don't do anything. That's, very preliminary. And it was very preliminary evidence, and, it could interfere with treatment. Now we know it probably would have really helped. But anyway, so in 2012, then my consultants were sort of, okay, you do what you need to do for peace of mind as well. And otherwise we can always remove the eye, so enucleation. And that's how my metabolic health journey was kick-started, and touch wood since 2012. So it was amazing how, because you can look into the eye, you can look into the tumor environment especially. So we saw that the blood vessels that were feeding the tumor, they drastically reduced within a few weeks, and also edema reduced. My vision then also started to come back, which was amazing because my optic nerve had been radiated. So they told me, oh, you're going to lose your vision within about 12 to 18 months. So I even remember signing a waiver. Yeah, I'm aware that this is going to happen, that I'm most likely going to turn blind in the right eye. So the vision came back. The vision is still really good and stable as well now. So that's 13 years after treatment. Again, then also the whole process of, what do I do? Because now there's so many resources, and keto, low carb, there's meal plans, but it was quite difficult, especially because I also had an 8-month-old and a 2.5-year-old in tow. So there was no such thing as perfectionism. I just got it done. And sometimes when my clients say, oh, but my sleep isn't perfect, or I can't exercise, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, is this still going to work? I always say, there's no harm. You can't do any harm with it if you do it right. And my approach was, far from perfect, because I had sleep disruptions. My time was limited, and I made mistakes at the beginning because I didn't have support. So that's just to reassure anyone who thinks this is too much and it's just too complicated, or I have to do this perfectly for it to work. I don't think so. It's just really, of course, taking a very considerate, study before, prepare before, but it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. You don't have to do everything. I didn't start with certain things until much later, and I see now some people just want to do it all in one go within a few days, and then I become overwhelmed and frustrated.
And what a journey, because it happened in 2012. So you didn't have much information. We now have much more information. And I think it might have been such an enormous mindset shift for an athlete, a triathlete, to go from a very high carb diet, as triathletes always go, and to a keto diet. Wow, amazing.
That's changing as well, interestingly.
Yes, it is.
There are athletes who are taking the low carb approach, and very successfully. Yeah, it is interesting. I'm still very interested, of course, in all that as well, and how we could apply it, because I think we are at higher risk as athletes, because we eat so much, and as you say, we eat so many carbs, and a lot of athletes are I was certainly insulin resistant. I had a lot of metabolic issues. I had a bit of fatty liver. I had a cyst on my kidney. I had a big lipoma. So all the signs were there. Yeah.
Yes, and that's why we often see that when people, stop their journey as athletes, they gain lots of weight and they get very metabolic and healthy.
Yeah.
But, during all this period, you have been changing a lot, and you change your profession.
Exactly.
And yes, so you have been helping so many people through your consultations, your beautiful book, The Ketogenic Kitchen, and through your recovery program with the great oncologist, Dr. Wafa.
Yeah.
So when you published your book with Dominic Kemp, you had been following already the keto diet for some years, for 4 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time. How have you been doing and feeling, and especially how has it been being in a full keto diet for so long?
It's really changed quite a bit. My initial approach, I was very much focused on the TKI, so the glucose ketone index to start with. And I was really quite strict. So I was generally around 1, between 1 and 2. So sometimes very low glucose, high ketones. And at the beginning, that was also quite, I wouldn't say easy, but it wasn't a huge effort, or it didn't take a long time. I was obviously quite young still, but I was very insulin resistant. So generally we say the more insulin resistant, the longer it can take. But I think age really is important. I did do it in a very focused manner, but wasn't easy. I never had, major sort of keto flu or side effects. I did overdo it on specific foods, namely nuts and eggs, which is quite common because you sort of, I don't know what to eat. Okay, I'm just going to eat nuts and eggs. I did lose quite a bit of weight at the beginning, maybe about 3-4 kilos, which was fine. And then it completely stabilized. And I think I'm sort of at an ideal weight now. But then I had a bit of my digestion was always really bad. I mean, for as long as I can remember, always sort of constipation, lots of bloating. Obviously, doing a lot of running doesn't help. Leaky gut, I'd say I definitely had, like a lot of athletes probably have if they're not super careful. And initially, everything really improved a lot. And that's sort of quite often, it is sort of that honeymoon phase. Oh, I feel amazing. And, ketones are elevated. And then sometimes problems can start a little bit, and that was definitely for me as well. That was the case, overdoing it on certain things and then having to sort that out. But it was nothing sort of major, and I definitely felt skin. I used to always be cold. Well, obviously moving as well to Ireland, but even back when I was living in Switzerland, I remember just finding it hard to keep my body temperature. I've never ever experienced that again. So I don't know if that was my thyroid or just generally metabolism. So yeah, I'd say generally it suited me very well. Of course, at the beginning, there was all the social stuff as well. When you're invited, when you eat out, all the questions, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Eating that much fat, you're not gonna die from cancer, but a heart attack. And all these things. And I think, it's great when people are curious, but sometimes it was really okay, but generally I had support. My husband has always been very supportive. Interestingly, when I started keto, I was still breastfeeding as well. And my son had just shown interest in weaning, and he was really big into the food. And as soon as I started keto, he lost interest in food, and it was so hard weaning him. I mean, he just, I think the composition of my milk changed quite a bit, and he was just, whoa, this stuff is amazing.
He was getting ketones as well.
Yeah, it was interesting because I mean, of course, breast milk is ketogenic as it is, and even generally, regardless of the mother's diet, that's helping the brain grow. The ketones are amazing for the brain, but it was really interesting because I was sort of, oh, okay, maybe I get a break from the feeding, and he's lost interest, and I was, no. Yeah, and then obviously starting to work with clients as well. I started then because some people they read about it and then they came to me, and initially I remember I said, we just don't have enough evidence. I can't help you because we just have to be so careful as well, of course, in our profession. And then it was a real ethical dilemma because some people said, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to do it myself, but chances are I'm going to screw myself up. You still have a lot more experience and you're doing it yourself. So can you please help me? And this is then how, I think in 2014 or 15, I published my first ebook, Practical Keto Meal Plans, they were called, just to get from, I think, 40 grams of net carbs down to 12 grams over 2 weeks. And then as soon as that was out, people were, okay, and now, I want to stay at 12 grams to really get into that therapeutic level of ketosis. Can you do meal plans for 12 grams? And that's how then with my ebooks, I saw that there was real demand, not just for other cancer patients, but also for epilepsy and neurological issues, because that's where the evidence was really solid. And it was part of standard of care. When drugs failed, we can do ketogenic diets for epilepsy. So we learned, of course, a lot through epilepsy as well. But I looked at the recipes and I was, they're not. There was too much dairy. There was too many sort of problematic foods, high oxalates. And I was, no, we need to adapt that. And that's really changed now in epilepsy, which is nice.
You are talking about patients who are already doing some research and they are interested in ketogenic diet. But how about those patients we have that eat like 300, 400 grams of carbs a day? They eat huge amount of carbs and they are very scared of going down when you say, let's go to 100 or 130 grams. And they are, oh my God, I'm going to die. How do you help your patients transition from this Western diet so rich in carbs to a strict ketogenic diet?
Yeah, interestingly, it's very rare that people haven't yet researched and already started when they come to me. So it is interesting, people who I think come across this approach, they read about it, they see the studies, you don't want to wait. So generally, people already have a really good idea. They have already started in some shape or form. But if somebody comes and they're really sort of what I used to eat as well, I do a bit what I call a tidy up and, taking them off the really refined carbs. Okay, let's start with the obvious, the treats, the refined carbs, the sugar, and educating them around that and how to read labels, especially as well. That's, very important. Of course, my dream is to move everyone to a whole food diet, but that's not always realistic. And not everybody can cook. So some people have to learn to cook as well. And I have a nice ebook as well with pictures. So where people can actually, they see, this is what it looks like if I put the equivalent of 1 gram of net carbs of broccoli on my plate, or lettuce, or fennel, or the same with protein as well. And just starting to learn about food and starting to learn about fats. Quite often I do a bit of just swapping things at the beginning. And okay, let's just take what you eat and then we just improve that. And then we start to also go and look at really reducing the carbs. But yeah, for some people, it is a very gradual, slow process, and others go very radical and start with fasting or something, or just go very quickly. And of course, different approaches require different types of support, different types of knowledge as well, that people are educated about electrolytes and all the pitfalls if they reduce quickly. Otherwise, they will probably have side effects.
And do you still have most patients are oncologic patients?
No, it's a complete mix now, actually. So Dr. Woffe and I, we started our Recovery Fundamentals program in December 2021. Just because also a patient group came and said, can we do this? And we're already a group together. So it was only oncology at the beginning till September of last year, when we then decided, because people asked, can we do this as well? I know you generally only work with cancer patients. And so I've actually then open it up to also type 2 diabetics. There's people who want to do it for, really healthy weight loss as well. We have people with epilepsy in the program as well. And actually some people who just also want to do prevention and learn and do nutrigenomics. And mental health is, of course, a big aspect as well, where we have a lot of science coming in, which is very encouraging, that it can be very helpful for depression or even bipolar or schizophrenia, like we saw at the conference. So I'd say in the next 2 years, there's going to be so much happening in that field as well. Or I also have then patients with PCOS, hormonal. I think for menopause, it can be very helpful as well. So yeah, the metabolic, we call it metabolic health group, and they're very mixed. Pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes is probably the most common sort of.
And how about that program? Is it an online program?
Yeah, it's online only. And so because we actually have patients from Australia all the way to the States, so around the globe.
And Dr. Wafa is in Egypt.
He's in Egypt, exactly. So we have quite a lot of Middle Eastern patients as well, which for me is amazing because you have to become really creative as well with food and recipes. And my dream is to have this map and click on an area and then ketofy, because people come, and like Africans, we have Africans on the program as well, and they're how can we replace fufu? And I was, what's fufu? Okay, let's. So it's a real learning for me as well, and how we can take the regional specialities that people are really connected with culturally, and how can we still somehow incorporate these, because I think that's really important as well. So because of that diversity, we always take it in turns, mornings, evenings, to do the live sessions. We have live sessions every week. Depending on where somebody is, they have the replay, and then they can come live every 2 weeks. So it's a nice compromise. Exactly.
They have recorded sessions and live sessions.
Exactly, yeah. So we always record everything, and then we have a whole video library of just learning, and that's what we basically work our way through in those 6 months of the program.
Exactly. That's amazing. I'm gonna take it.
You probably know a lot, though.
Yes, I do. But it's always nice hearing from you and Dr. Wafa.
There's always learning. I always say that.
Of course. And how about you and your health? Are you stable?
Yeah, so I just had my scan on in May, actually, and it's for the first time now we're moving to yearly annual checkups.
Oh, that's great.
It used to be every 6 weeks, and then every 3 months, and every 6 months. And for a long time I was at that 6 months, but then COVID happened, and I think I didn't have a checkup for almost 2 years. And I was so nervous going in because I was, oh my God, and I had COVID, and sometimes, with the literature, you look into it, what viruses in general.
Trigger, yes, for inflammation and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to make sure we do the right thing when we catch a virus, especially afterwards as well. So I was very aware of that. So I think I had my checkup then about 6 months after COVID. I was okay. I think it's time to come in and see what the tumor is doing, and it's so really nicely shrinking now. We can see finally, because it took a long time. It just seemed to be not shrinking anymore for a while, and it's just dead tissue. It's just necrotic tissue. And now we're doing, again, it's always a bit of, that's what I always say, everybody's so different. It's a bit of trial and error. So I looked into ways, how can I make sure that necrotic tissue can leave the eye, because it's not like other tissue where there's a lot of blood circulation, and it's quite easy for scars or tumors or whatever lesions to dissolve. It's very different in the eye, so it's a very slow dripping water process, but it's finally happening, and we see the choroidal veins again, and so it's very exciting.
Wow, yeah, it's very exciting. And what are the potential mechanisms that explain why the ketogenic diet can be added to cancer treatment protocols? In light of the knowledge you have accumulated over the years, how do you feel about that? What's the knowledge that supports this? And what's your take on ketone levels as well? Is it enough for cancer patients to be in a light ketosis state, or do you have to go higher?
Yeah, great questions. So I think in terms of the mechanisms, we keep learning. Initially, I think as well, when we published the book, there were so many misunderstandings, misconceptions, the whole sugar feeds cancer, that people are very, very focused on that. And especially also, I remember the head of research of the Irish Cancer Society, he said, oh, that's all nonsense. You can't manipulate your blood glucose levels. You can't bring them down to 0. There's always going to be glucose in your blood. Yeah, of course. You're totally right. That's not our point. Our point is that whenever you have glucose spikes, and it doesn't take that much actually to
yes, eat a banana and can go higher depending on your genetics and metabolic health.
Yeah, some people a bit of lentils, and different people are sensitive to different things, and that depends on on the microbiome, on our genetic makeup, on our stress levels, you name it. There's amazing
Age.
reasons. Yeah, age, exactly. And then whenever we spike glucose, it's conceived as like a danger, an alert for the body. And what happens is insulin is secreted. And what we think, and what came out, I think, in some of the lectures at the conference in Bergün as well, we can't just talk about blood glucose. It's insulin, really, that, we should probably call our book the insulin inhibiting kitchen and not the ketogenic kitchen. And I often say that as well, it's really, what can we do to make sure we don't spike insulin and activate oncogenic pathways? Because insulin is a very potent growth factor. And it's also like a traffic warden. It actually controls whether we store nutrients, whether we use nutrients, put them into the cells for energy generation, and so many other things. I mean, insulin has so many impacts, and every single cell actually in the body depends to some degree on insulin for signaling, for knowing what to do. It's not like other hormones that are cell specific. So insulin is very different, and it is very important. That's definitely one of the major mechanisms. So if we can avoid those spikes and then, going down too low as well, that's also a problem, because when we have poor glucose control and constantly go hypoglycemic, so if we tend to have low glucose and we can't hold it in that nice range, that's also initiating a whole cascade of problematic hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. Glucagon is, also involved there, but we don't want constant cortisol spikes. And that's really the problem when we cannot maintain good blood glucose regulation. And we know now from the US, from statistics, that about 88% of the population have this problem. They are metabolically unhealthy, which is a massive number, so that they are probably on this constant roller coaster. And it takes years or sometimes decades until blood glucose then also, when we measure HbA1c, which is sort of the average blood glucose over about 2 to 3 months, that creeps up then. That's what we measure to diagnose somebody with prediabetes. But if we measured insulin and we saw that's really elevated, be it fasting insulin or, doing Kraft tests, for instance, as well, that's quite often elevated for years and decades before the blood glucose moves. So we need to move away from focusing only on blood glucose. Very important. And then I mentioned angiogenesis, that is also impacted by ketogenesis. So that's the growth of new blood vessels. That's what we saw was happening, and that's happening to every tumor as soon as it exceeds a certain size. It needs nutrients and supplies from nearby blood vessels, and that's how it does it. It's basically signaling to the nearby blood vessels with, for instance, VEGF or whatever growth factors. We need you, come here. And that's how the tumor gets fed then ultimately. And we know that that's impacted by ketogenesis, by low carb potentially as well, because ketones are also signaling molecules. They're not just a fuel for mainly also the brain. So if it wasn't for ketones, we definitely wouldn't be here anymore, because we can't access our fat stores, and we can't actually use fatty acids as fuel source. And if we have no food for about 2-3 days or even less, we just wouldn't be able to generate energy. So it's a very basic human fuel and signaling molecule without which we wouldn't be here as a species. And so that's the other signaling. And that leads me then to epigenetics. So we know that ketones can also act as HDAC inhibitors. And there were some really nice other mechanisms shown as well at the conference. So we know epigenetically there's a lot going wrong for cancer patients, and not just for cancer patients, in many disease processes. And that's what's also getting modulated in a positive way. So tumor suppressor genes can be upregulated, and so that's obviously very important from a cancer perspective. The list goes on, but these are some of the most important mechanisms for cancer patients. And the level of ketosis, it was really easy to have a very low GKI, so have high ketones, low glucose. And then the longer I went on, I was sort of, I can't have those super high ketones anymore, although I haven't changed my diet. And again, we have sort of preliminary evidence that we just get better and better at utilizing ketones. And in the blood, the ketones are almost like a buffer. So we then use them if our whole energy generation system is well adapted. Our cells, they basically take ketones and burn them with ease. But it can take a bit of time for that shift to happen. The longer we are in ketosis, the better our cells are. Oh, okay, ketones. Of course, we take them. We don't leave them in the blood. Why would we leave them in the blood if we can use them? And I think that's sort of the next steps in the research as well, especially looking at acetone a lot more, and especially good stable acetone measuring tools. Then we can really see if acetone reflects what we actually have burned in terms of fatty acids and ketones. And if we have very high acetone levels and quite low beta hydroxybutyrate in the blood, we know we're probably just using the ketones very efficiently and they're not buffering in the blood. And of course, there's also, we can measure ketone levels in the urine as well, but that's sort of only a reflection of, do we even produce ketone levels? And I always say to my clients when they're sort of, oh God, I don't have any urine ketones anymore. And because you're using them, you're actually not losing them. So I think it's quite a good sign if we don't have any ketones after a while. At the beginning, it's a good measuring. It reflects that we produce them, so we have the ability, but we don't know if we're using them yet.
Yeah. Wow, that's all very interesting, and it was very enlightening. And how can people get in touch with you if they have another questions or if they want to work with you?
Sure, yeah. I have a website, Patricia Daly, so DALY.com. So a lot of information is there, or also email support@patriciadaly.com is the best email to get to me. Or I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And so any channel I generally check on a regular basis, but email is probably the quickest, exactly, and going to the website.
Perfect. Patricia, thank you so much.
Yeah,
it was
so much.
super nice having you here. I hope we meet again soon.
Yes, we will. Yeah,
in any congress, and you're invited to come to Portugal, of course. I'd love to have you here, and see you later.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye, Andreia.
See you soon. Bye bye.